sitting in the hot seat is all in a day's work.
This is your fanny plug here.
In a job where making one mistake can be life-threatening, this business is not for the faint of heart.
You could have a fire, you could have an explosion.
You might even find yourself holding a tiger by the tail.
Basically, the person that's looking out for everybody else in the cage has a hell of the cat's tail. If the cat starts to get up or to move off, I can spin them out of the direction of all the other folks.
To keep on trucking in this business, you better be good. One of the most potentially destructive forms of dangerous cargo is high explosives. The Tri-State Motor Transit Company of Joplin, Missouri has specialized in carrying them since 1924. Today, they're preparing to haul a particularly nasty load of RDX explosives to a Joplin incinerator to be destroyed. This load and every similar load benefits from over 100 years of technology the shipping industry has developed for hauling modern high explosives.
RDX explosives, it is a very, very delicate high explosive. It's usually manufactured for shape charges, which is the detonation or demolition of buildings, artillery shells, mortar shells, high impact bombs. It was test material. The manufacturer got the results, and the leftovers have to be disposed of.
Tri-State also transports dated munitions.
The material in the canisters is .30 caliber ammunition, shells, that were either wet, outdated, and they have to be properly disposed of also.
Every journey begins with a single step. And in Tri-State's case, the first step has been to specially customize the truck to accommodate this extremely dangerous load.
The suspension system on the trucks is a specially designed air ride suspension that gives a floatability to the load just to keep anything from shaking when they're going down the nation's highways.
The truck also features a dromedary trailer.
It's a series of combination-sized boxes to fit together. It was named after the humps of the camel, the dromedary camel, because all of the boxes are not the same height or width. They're primarily built by Tri-State for explosives.
Even the floors of the containers are customized.
The trailer floors and the box floors are designed with a special water-resistant apatone wood. It's from Africa and some parts of South America.
The explosives are carefully loaded into the boxes.
When fork trucks are used to load the material into our boxes, they are fitted and stabilized with freight bars and special straps that are attached to the sidewalls of the box to hold them in place so they don't move around during transport. When it's complete and paperwork's checked, the boxes are locked and sealed with the secure seals that have numbers, and they're coded to the paperwork and have to be related and transferred to the destination.
The truck is placarded. And it's time to hit the road. The highway to safely transporting explosives has been a rocky one. Early attempts to transport explosives such as nitroglycerin often ended in tragedy because of inexperienced shippers and the unstable nature of the explosive. In a way, Swedish chemist Albert Nobel made the world a little safer when he harnessed the power of nitro in 1866 by creating dynamite.
We found that by mixing the nitroglycerin with a material called kieselguhr, he could stabilize it, and then it would not explode prematurely, only explode when initiated by a blasting cap or some other small source of explosion.
Although the creation of dynamite was a step forward in the safe handling of explosives, they still represented a threat, especially when being transported by amateur truckers. Many of these shippers were lax in following safety precautions, had little technical knowledge of the explosives themselves, and often transported the material in unsafe vehicles.
There were a lot of accidents, a lot of injuries, a lot of property damage.
It wasn't until the Motor Carrier Act of 1935 that the U.S. trucking industry was finally held to higher standards. And and the transportation of explosives by truck became more professional.
Set guidelines that everybody had to follow, and the amateurs slowly fell out of the race, so to speak. They could not comply or did not wish to comply with the guidelines. Safety standards were put into effect to control the inspections of the vehicles, to be safe to run over the highways, all the way to driver qualifications.
Today, those who drive explosives trucks, like Tri-State's Willie Berry, are among the most qualified drivers in the country.
Willie Berry has been driving at Tri-State 29 years. He has 31 years total driving experience, and he has over 2.7 million safe miles with Tri-State. That's quite a phenomenal record.
I like the challenge. Each day is the same, but it's different because each day, each load gives you a different type of challenge.
Tri-State has a policy: if one speeding ticket is obtained by a driver, it's automatic termination. No questions asked.
The route of an explosives truck is carefully plotted ahead of time.
There are communities and areas across the country that have designated routes to avoid them, to go around them. Bypass interstates are taken.
Dictated by federal law, the truck must stop at all railroad crossings and can only be fueled at specially designated gas stations on routes approved by the Department of Transportation and individual states.
We have a list of the ones in a book that all of our drivers carry, so they know if they're in a certain state on a certain road, this fuel stop is available.
Equipped with a Qualcomm satellite global positioning system, the truck and its route can be carefully monitored from Tri-State's main office in Joplin. If an accident occurs or other important information needs to be communicated, the system also allows the driver to quickly get in touch, no matter where he is.
It is immediately responded to by law enforcement, by our own facilities, wherever they might be, and first responders are immediately summoned.
The truck also has a panic button.
Push this button here if you're having a problem, and it will go through the satellite system, and they will send someone out to assist you.
The truck's final destination is Joplin's EBV Explosives Environmental Company, where its load will be burnt in a specially built incinerator.
The original design was patterned after an Army unit that was used for a number of years to incinerate munitions and other explosives. We've taken that design and improved it, put state-of-the-art air pollution control equipment on it, put a computer control system on it, and continuous feed.
The explosives are carefully fed into the incinerator.
We incinerate material between 300 and 1,000 degrees in a rotary kiln. Sound within 10 to 15 feet of the building is pretty loud. We require hearing protection in certain areas around the outside of the kiln building.
Most shipments of explosives reach their final destination without incident. Yet in this age of terrorism, shipping companies and security device manufacturers are striving to make the process even safer. On April 19, 1995, the Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City had its north side sheared off by a massive bomb ignited in a rental truck that was parked outside. 168 people perished in the explosion, which was the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil prior to 9/11.
The bombing in Oklahoma City in 1995 was not dynamite. It was actually a mixture of two very common chemicals, namely ammonium nitrate, which is used commonly as fertilizer, and fuel oil. By mixing these two together, it actually produces a relatively powerful explosive.
The event graphically brought home the potential danger that terrorists could hijack explosives trucks and drive them right up to their targets. Truck security device manufacturers like Qualcomm are currently developing technology that will make hijacking much more difficult in the future. One device showing great promise is the biometric scanner. It electronically identifies the officially assigned driver of a truck and rejects anyone else who tries to take the wheel, such as a hijacker.
It's basically looking at your thumbprint, your DNA, your iris, whatever. It's trying to identify you with a certain part of your anatomy to figure out if it's really you.
The device might work in conjunction with a transportation worker identification card.
That TWIC card could hold your biometric information. Let's say it's your fingerprint. So what we want to do is say, is there a fingerprint reader that can go in the cab of a vehicle? Basically, you put your card in the card slot, you put your finger on the reader, and it would basically allow you to start the vehicle and operate it.
There was also concern that a truck might be hijacked, and the trailer containing the explosives might be transferred to another truck. Previously, only the trucks themselves have had global positioning equipment that allows shippers and law enforcement officials to track them. Now, Qualcomm has introduced the T2 trailer, which also has GPS capability.
What T2 allows you to do is know where those trailers are all the time. Are they on the right road? Is somebody using them that shouldn't be using them? And so how do you track that? And that's what T2 allows you to do.
Once a hijacked truck has been identified, it's still hard to stop. The California Highway Patrol and Lawrence Livermore Labs are experimenting with various devices that will allow law enforcement officers to stop a truck before it can reach its destination. One device is built into the bumper of the trailer and can be activated when touched by the bumper of a pursuing patrol car, triggering the truck's air brakes. Another device works on the same principle, but is radioactivated. Through technologies such as these, the trucking industry hopes to stay several steps ahead of potential hijackers. Transporting tons of high explosives is one thing, but the explosive temperament of a tiger can test the resources of any dangerous cargo carrier. One of the most dangerous jobs in the world of zoology is the transportation of big cats. It takes know-how, courage, and expert planning to succeed. The transportation of wild animals has developed over years of research and experimentation. During the 19th century, the methods were very primitive and often cruel. Frequently, animals were transported in inadequate cages or poorly ventilated, with little consideration for the creature's special characteristics and habits.
Sometimes with the weather, if they were transported by train or by truck or whatever, going across deserts, many of them would die just because of the heat.
The most important and far-reaching legislation concerning the treatment of animals came with the Animal Welfare Act of 1966.
It not only deals with the transportation, it deals with the facilities that they live in, the care that they're given, the foods that they're given. The regulations are extremely stringent.
Today, these guidelines are followed to exacting detail by organizations such as the Fort Worth Zoo in Texas, which is going to transport this rare Indo-Chinese tiger to the Miami Metro Zoo in Florida.
His name's Hati. He's a 2-year-old Indo-Chinese tiger. He has 2 siblings, which are both females.
Hati is being transported as part of a species survival plan breeding program. Long before the zoo ventures to move any animal, it plans out the operation with exacting precision. A key to the process is sedating the tiger, so he can be given a thorough physical examination before the journey.
The immobilizing agents are actually a combination of drugs. There's actually 3 drugs that were used: medetomidine, Valium, and ketamine. The animal is injected with a remote injection dart. It's fired from an air-powered pistol. Once we see that the cat's stable and that he's definitely in a good state of sedation, the keepers will come in with a cargo net, and we lay that behind the cat, slide him onto it. The reason that we use this is to give us good handholds for the cat. That really helps us carry him out of the night house.
During these critical moments, there's always concern that the cat may come out of his sedated state.
He won't be mobile enough to jump up and run off, but sometimes they will move around. And if they have the use of their forepaws or their mouth, someone could get injured. the likelihood of that with the dosages that we've worked out is not very likely, but it is always a possibility.
During all parts of the procedure, the cat's vital signs are carefully monitored by the zoo's veterinarian.
She can monitor his facial expressions, his eyes, check his breathing, check the color of his lips and his gums, his tongue.
Is he breathing on his own with 36, or are you doing that?
The reason we do health exams on our animals before they leave the zoo to go to other institutions is basically to make sure that the animal is healthy. We don't want to send the other zoo an animal that may have some health problem that we didn't detect when the animal's in its enclosure or on its exhibit.
The tiger will then be moved to a specially built crate.
Obviously, the crate has to be sound, has to be strong so it can contain the tiger. So we use aircraft-grade aluminum in the crate to allow a good airflow so the animal stays cool.
Consideration is also given to the tiger's food and water intake during the journey.
There is a container inside where water can be added, and there's also a feed chute on the top.
The crate is also designed for sanitation.
At the bottom there's a tray, and then inside this tray we put some absorbent material. Any moisture that may come into the crate at the time while he's in there is collected in there, and then there's a slatted floor that actually sits on top of that so that the cat always has a dry place to lay.
After the tiger has been placed in the crate, he's given a reversal agent to bring him out of the sedated state.
The reversal agent is actually given to a vein in the rear leg, and once that's done, we'll slide the back door into the crate. We leave the trach tube in there until the tiger is responding, and we think he's just about ready to get up. So this is probably another point where it's a little bit dangerous for the staff. At that point, we'll set the front door of the crate down.
The tiger is allowed to rest for several hours before being transported to the airport for his journey to Miami. Not familiar with being in such a confined space, his wrath can be triggered by anyone walking near the crate. He's picked up by a DHL shipping service truck for the journey to the airport. DHL is also transporting a giant tortoise from the Fort Worth Zoo to the Miami Metro Zoo. All DHL employees involved in the tiger transport have gone through safety briefings concerning the handling of the tiger.
You want to be careful with your hands around the crate because there are some openings that your fingers can go into, and even if it's unintentional, if they go in, you know, a tiger gets your fingers, you won't come back out with it.
Every detail of the loading process has been worked out by the Fort Worth Zoo and DHL before even arriving at the airport. The crate is moved onto the plane by a K-loader, which is an elevator device used to move cargo up into the plane's hold.
We're going to be loading the tiger in what we call position 3 on the aircraft. This allows us to put the tiger on last on the plane and also allows us to remove it from the aircraft first. We've briefed the flight crew in regards to the temperature that's needed to keep the animal calm. We're going to keep this particular aircraft at a 60 to 70 degree temperature, which will allow the animal to remain at its normal temperature.
The trip to Miami takes 4 hours. It includes one brief stopover in Cincinnati. The tiger's plane is greeted in the Sunshine State by waiting members of the Miami Metro Zoo, the press, and DHL attendants.
Almost all of the zoos have the same practice with incoming animals, and we usually put them through a 30-day quarantine. The crate will be butted up against and secured so that it can't slip back. At that time, then the locks are removed from the crate, and the 2 doors will be opened, and the cat has the opportunity to leave the shipping container. A very important aspect of this move that we did here today, sending Hati to Miami, is the fact that these tigers will reproduce, that we are cooperating, and we're going to have tigers for many, many years for our children and our children's children to see at zoos here in the United States.
Tigers aren't the only dangerous cargo that need quick transport by jet. Life-saving radioactive pharmaceuticals are often rushed to hospitals in Learjets. Handling radioactive materials is always dangerous. Even more so when doing it quickly is part of the equation. Radioactive pharmaceuticals have become important tools in modern medicine. After being injected into the body, they allow physicians to observe the cells at work. They are especially useful as an advanced form of cancer detection. However, there is a catch to their effectiveness. Some of the drugs have a potency lifespan measured only in hours.
One of the very short-lived radioactive pharmaceuticals is fluorodeoxyglucose. This material has a half-life of 110 minutes, which means approximately every 2 hours, 50% of the material decays by normal processes.
In order to rush the drug to hospitals and pharmacies in distant cities, drug manufacturers like Cardinal Health have turned to air carriers to transport them at high speeds. The success of the air carrier in delivering this radioactive material on time can literally be a matter of life and death to a patient waiting in some faraway city. Yet the transport must always be done with extreme caution. Here, Cardinal Health is creating a new shipment of the short-lived fluorodeoxyglucose, which is also known as FDG. A crucial moment in the process is when the drug is bombarded with radioactive protons in the lab's cyclotron.
During the bombardment process, a significant amount of radiation is generated by the proton bombardment. Therefore, we make sure that the vault is sealed and personnel entry is forbidden. All of our workers wear radiation monitoring devices to ensure that we monitor at all times exposures and exposure histories.
From this moment on, the drug is synthesized into a hazardous material, or Hazmat, and is treated accordingly.
Following the synthesis of FDG, it's delivered directly into a lead-lined cabinet, which is called a hot cell. The walls of the lead cabinet are approximately 3 inches thick, as necessary to safely shield personnel during the handling of this material. We use remote manipulators, devices that allow the handling of the product from outside the hot cell.
Cardinal Health depends on techniques developed over the last half-century by the radiopharmaceutical industry. This industry is a direct byproduct of America's experiments with nuclear energy during World War II.
Radioactive materials in medicine, for all practical purposes, began in 1946 as an outshoot of the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. At that time, radioactive materials were distributed for research purposes to a number of hospitals in the U.S.
Due to the short-lived potency of the drugs, planes became the preferred mode for shipping them. However, regulations involving how the drugs were packaged and transported were sometimes violated. Several incidents involving radioactive leakage spurred a call for tighter regulations.
During the 1970s, a variety of situations arose where there was leakage or problems that occurred with packages that didn't meet sufficient standards to contain the radioactive elements.
The Transportation Safety Act of 1974 addressed these concerns, and the packaging and shipping of the drugs became more tightly regulated. Today, radioactive pharmaceuticals are transported in what are called Type A containers, which are made of lead or tungsten.
The Type A container is tested pursuant to government requirements to ensure the integrity of the product in drop test, puncture resistance, and other forms of damage that might routinely be expected to incur during shipment.
After being sealed, the container is checked for any radioactive leakage and labeled. Next, it's placed in a special metal box called an ammo can.
It's basically a container that's used by military in prior use, that is, to contain ammunition. Because these containers stand up well to the rigors of transportation, They've also been applied to the manner in which radioactive materials are often shipped today.
The canisters are given one last radiation check. Just 10 minutes after coming out of the hot cell, the pharmaceuticals are handed over to a driver for AirNet, a Columbus, Ohio-based Air Express company. Then it's off to the airport, 10 miles away. AirNet operates a fleet of Lear jets to speed their cargoes as quickly as possible.
Our system is built for speed. The backbone of our national air system is the Lear 35. It's a very dependable, fast aircraft. It's perfectly suited for the customer base that we serve.
Although traditional air carriers also carry radiopharmaceuticals, AirNet has found its niche in the air cargo business through specialization in the field.
The company handles quite a bit of dangerous goods, hazardous material, including the transportation of radioactive product, medicine, radiopharmaceuticals.
Because of its specially trained staff, AirNet can handle larger quantities of radioactive goods than traditional carriers.
We set out on a 9-month process to prepare our company with function-specific training to allow our handlers, pilots, loaders the experience to be experts in this industry. And we carry more time-critical radiopharmaceuticals than anyone else in the industry.
Once at the AirNet facility, the drugs are sent through a check-in procedure designed for efficiency and speed.
The shipment is reviewed to ensure that the packaging is in good condition, that all documentation has been completed.
Next, they're weighed. Finally, they're rushed to the plane. The sense of urgency is so great during the process that AirNet employees often run through their duties.
During our process, we expect all components to be done expeditiously and safely.
On the plane, the drugs are secured in the cargo hold.
The radioactive level material in the aircraft is carefully monitored before takeoff to ensure that there are no issues.
With all in order, it's time for an immediate takeoff. It's been just 30 minutes since the drugs were manufactured. Flights rarely last more than 2 hours because of the urgency of getting the pharmaceuticals to the hospitals on time.
Think of it as a melting ice cube.
From its base in Columbus, Ohio, and with the Learjet speed of 440 nautical miles per hour, AirNet can easily deliver the drug to cities such as Chicago and New York within the 2-hour time frame.
So a patient is waiting on the other end of our shipment to know whether they have cancer or whether it's some other indication that the doctor is looking for. We must move expeditiously from the time we pick up the package to the time we tender it to our aircraft, to the time that aircraft lands, to the time it's delivered.
Now it's just a short trip for the drugs to the hospital. The delivery of this cargo on time is much more than just a delivery deadline met. It's an important mission accomplished in trying to prolong someone's life. The job of hauling dangerous cargo is full of peril, perhaps no more so than in times of war. During World War II, the merchant marine had to transport munitions through enemy submarine-infested waters. Among the greatest unsung heroes of World War II were the officers and crew members of the Merchant Marine. Without their heroic efforts, the war may have been lost or prolonged by years. These were the men who transported the bombs, the fuel, the dangerous cargo needed by the Allies to defeat the Axis enemy.
Without the supplies, without the tanks and the guns and the ammunition and the food, there would be no armies, because the armies could not survive unless the Merchant Marine carried these goods across the oceans to them.
The Merchant Marine is a fleet of ships which carries imports and exports during peacetime, but becomes a naval auxiliary during wartime to deliver cargo. The men who served on the ships weren't members of the armed forces.
They are all civilians. They joined on their own accord and went into joined the Merchant Marine, which is, you had to go through the Coast Guard to get your seaman's papers. You became a merchant seaman.
Although not in uniform, the crew members of the merchant ships not only transported dangerous cargo, they often faced battle situations that equaled those of anyone in the service.
A torpedo is built to sink just about anything it hits, and when you got hit by a torpedo, depending on where it hit the ship, you know, that was a death knell. If it was in the wintertime in the North Atlantic, why, if you got off the ship, you're probably going to freeze to death. If it was a tanker, now you were on a fireball, you know. It was very, very horrendous.
The loss of life on these vessels was truly staggering.
It was dangerous enough that the Merchant Marine during World War II, percentage-wise, lost more people, had more people killed than any of the armed services.
During the early years of the war, German submarines sank Allied merchant ships as fast as they could be built. Realizing the war could be lost if the supply lines between the United States and Europe were cut, the Allies began to build Liberty ships. The whole idea was to build a reliable ship, extraordinarily fast. The Liberty ships were 411 feet long and 62 feet wide. They were mass-produced in assembly line fashion, with each ship having interchangeable parts. The first ship took 244 days to construct, but by May of 1942, that number was cut to 72. And by August of 42, they were being assembled in 46 days. Although Allied fleets were now growing in number, the ships were still extremely susceptible to German U-boat attacks. Many of the first Liberty ships were unarmed, making them easy pickings for German submarines, who didn't even use torpedoes to sink them.
If the ships couldn't fight back, you could surface and use your deck gun, and you could sink a lot of ships on the surface, not wasting a torpedo on a merchant ship.
It was decided to protect the cargo carriers with armed Navy guards. But even with this added firepower, the ships were still extremely vulnerable.
We would call the sitting ducks. You say somebody, "Oh God," they say, "Oh God, what are you, mad? You crazy?" Because, you know, the ships were minimally armed. It was no fun.
Although the guards were effective enough to stop German submarines from picking off Liberty ships with their deck guns, they couldn't stop the torpedo attacks.
It was scary when, in the middle of the night, everything is blacked out, you can't see anything, and then you see this explosion.
Perhaps the most perilous part of their transatlantic journey took place in the air gap, a wide band of the North Atlantic that was not patrolled by Allied aircraft, and took 4 to 5 days to cross.
You lost your air cover, and this is when you were out in the middle of the ocean, and this is what the Germans knew. They didn't want to be operating close to the shores where they could be discovered by the airplanes, so you were on your own.
If stricken at sea and unable to move on with a convoy, ships were often left behind.
The ship could not keep up with the convoy, and they had engine problems, and because the convoy could not stop for them, the convoy kept moving all of the time.
In an effort to bolster the speed of the merchant marine fleet, Victory ships were introduced in 1944. The Victory ships could reach a maximum speed of 17 knots, a 7-knot increase over the Liberty ships, giving them a better chance of avoiding Nazi subs. Ultimately, the Liberty and Victory ships delivered the goods. By war's end, they had carried over 75% of the supplies needed to assure victory for the Allies. The men who served on Liberty and Victory ships had the ultimate dangerous cargo jobs, and they paid the ultimate price. During World War II, nearly 6,000 men perished while serving in the American Merchant Marine. Hazardous materials, or hazmats, explosive, toxic, radioactive, noxious, and just plain deadly. No one wants them, but we can't live without them. Hazmats are the nasty byproducts of our industrial age. They're the dirty stuff that makes the world go round. Our coming to grips with how to handle them has been a long and painful process. During the 19th and 20th centuries, hazardous materials were often just dumped into rivers and waterways and forgotten. Many took an out-of-sight, out-of-mind attitude when dealing with the substances, but the government did slowly move forward in trying to regulate them.
There's been loss of life, loss of property, and loss of products that has caused significant regulation, compliance restrictions, and legislation.
During the 1980s, federal legislation dealing with hazmats leaped forward. As is often the case, it took a catastrophic disaster to spur positive legislation. The incident occurred in December of 1984.
The most significant incident occurred when Union Carbide was operating a plant in Bhopal, India, and over the course of the late hours of the evening, dispersed a chemical gas that early in the morning was found out that there was at least 2,500 people dead in their beds in their homes.
The disaster immediately raised a call for stronger hazmat legislation in America.
The laws were basically called the Emergency Planning Law and the Community Right to Know Law. And what these processes did was instill in everybody that manufactured, handled, and processed chemicals that they now needed to report the chemicals on site in their facilities so that not only emergency response people could act immediately to any disruption due to a chemical spill, but also that the community had the right to know of what was transpiring within the four walls of these businesses.
Stricter legislation drove many out of the hazmat business, but it was seen as an opportunity for others, such as the Weber Distribution Company, which specializes in transporting, warehousing, and distributing hazmats. Its state-of-the-art facility in Santa Fe Springs, California, serves as a storage terminal for hazmats in transit. The vast complex is divided into separate areas, each tailored to store specific hazardous materials. Federal legislation forbids the commingling of hazmats that aren't compatible.
There are very strict requirements in regards to commingling and compatibility with various chemicals. That's why our particular building here in Santa Fe Springs is sectioned off into 14 different rooms.
One of the most carefully designed rooms is the one where poisons and toxins are stored.
Today, our poison room basically has cyanide materials in there, various types of cyanide, sodium, copper, potassium cyanide.
Many safeguards, including the fire door, are built into the room in case some disaster should strike.
The door is designed and engineered with a fusible link that would automatically close once it hits certain heat levels. This door would, in fact, guillotine down to help circumvent or mitigate any problems we have in the building.
The room also features a special air filter system to protect against the emission of toxic fumes in case of an emergency.
We have a charcoal-filtered air scrubber that sucks up air throughout the building, funnels it through the system itself. In the event of fire, it would filter any fumes or contaminants before it enters the environment.
The entire complex is computer-controlled. With a click of a button, Weber can locate every object stored in the massive facility. Not only is this advantageous for inventory control, it's mandatory for safety.
If wrong product is pulled, it could cause severe damage in the manufacturing process or when loaded on the trucks with uncompatible product. We're very strict and detailed in identifying what product goes in what hazard classifications.
Products can be stored in the warehouse for as little as a few hours or up to several years. The average time containers are kept here is 3 months. The room containing flammables has some of the most stringent safety measures. Even the forklifts that are used here are special.
What we had to do was go out and bring in EE rated forklifts. All of its operating mechanism, all of the electrical wiring, all the circuitry is in a steel box And by putting them in steel boxes, you're lessening the issue and the problems of the emission of a spark. By eliminating the ignition source, we're cutting back on the possibility of a fire or an explosion.
The room also features explosion-proof lighting.
Explosion-proof lighting are simply lights that are hermetically sealed. Again, just the same as our EE rated forklifts, all the electrical mechanisms are encased in a metal box so that if there's a spark, it won't get out into the environment, into the atmosphere of that room.
The entire building has an elaborate fire sprinkler safety system. But in the flammable section, this precaution is taken even further by placing the sprinklers directly on the storage racks.
There's a little fusible link inside the sprinkler heads, and once a certain temperature is accumulated, they will go off. Now, normally that temperature is it's over 200 degrees.
Security at the chemical storage facility is a top priority.
Security is very tight here, and it has gotten more strict since 9/11. Weber goes through a significant background check with all of our employees. This includes past employment history, Social Security validation, criminal background check, drug and alcohol testing.
The tightest security on the grounds is for the area known as the cage.
The chemicals that are stored in this particular area are precursors or could be used in such a form and fashion as an item to manufacture illicit drugs.
These chemicals can also be used for the manufacture of legitimate drugs. Pharmaceutical companies turn to Weber to store them when they are not needed for production. Closed-circuit surveillance cameras are trained on the area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
There are only 3 individuals in our company and all supervisors or higher that are allowed to open and close the locked area, for that product. The product is maintained in that room until it's escorted to put on the outbound vehicle.
Like all other handlers of dangerous cargo, Weber has found you can never be too cautious or too prepared.
If your employees are not properly trained, and if they're not aware of the commodities that are being stored in your building, it could be a recipe for disaster.
The placards say it all. Transporting dangerous cargo is serious business. There are no easy routes, no shortcuts to the final destinations in this business. Those who deliver the goods on time are those who clearly see all the curves in the bumpy road they travel.